What little disgusting secret do you have? Story 1. One Father's Day years ago, I got a bag for the presents I bought for my dad. The bag had a picture attached that looked like a drawing a kid would have made of him and his dad sitting on a cliff, with the words "Dad's Rock" written in handwriting that was actually pretty similar to mine. Jokingly, I crossed out the artist's name and put my own. The day after Father's Day, he called me while I was at my mom's house and told me he had been digging through the trash, looking for some mail he accidentally threw away when he saw the bag again. Turns out he never noticed my signature at the bottom and said he loved that I went through the effort to make something for Father's Day. For some reason, I just went with it and said that I drew it. He ended up taking it to a shop and having it framed. He made a second copy and has kept it on the fridge for 9 years. He always brags about it to any guests that come over. It is my greatest fear that someday someone will recognize the drawing from a bag they bought at Target. Story 2. Very late to the party, but here we go. Not me, but my best friend in high school, for some reason, thought that if he didn't poop, his body would eventually just digest 100% of the waste and turn it into energy. Admittedly, for about the first 3 to 5 days, it was a painful battle, but he managed to keep it all in. After that, the pains he was feeling sort of went away. Fast forward maybe a week or two, we went to Costco for lunch, $1.50 hot dogs, and while we were at a table eating, I saw a look of agonizing pain cross his face. He said he had to go to the bathroom and that he'd meet me outside. Now this is when things got real. He knew at that moment his experiment had failed and that it was time to release the poop. He got to a stall and started to push, but it wasn't all coming out. It started normally enough, but very quickly the coil grew in diameter, and he couldn't push it past his rim anymore. He found out later that what had happened was that his poop had essentially dried up and hardened inside him, coming out and forming a reverse butt plug situation. Knowing that this wasn't going to come out on its own, he somehow managed to crab walk from the toilet to the sink, take the mirror off the wall, place it on the floor, squat over it, and, for sanitary concerns, wrap his hands to his elbows in toilet paper. At this point, he assumed the position, grabbed on with both hands, and with a violent push-pull technique, released the plug of pressure and everything else that was built up behind it, instantly passing out. This is where I re-enter the story. After almost an hour of waiting in the Costco parking lot, I went to the customer service desk and informed them that my friend had been in the bathroom for a long time and that maybe someone should check on him. I was greeted with a very odd look from an elderly lady at the counter, who then followed me to the restroom with a set of keys. I opened the door to find my best friend face down on a mirror, pants around his ankles, blood and waste everywhere, with half of his arms wrapped up like a bad mummy costume on Halloween. Needless to say, paramedics were called. He had a concussion from hitting the floor and needed multiple stitches in the affected area. Then he had to explain to his parents, doctors, and Costco managers what happened and why he thought not pooping was a good idea. But because I was a good friend, when everyone asked why he wasn't at school for a week, I said we got drunk off a shot of every bottle in my parents' liquor cabinet, so nothing looked empty, climbed a tree in my backyard, and that he fell and landed on the fence. This is the first time I've ever told anyone this story. Story 3. When my grandmother was a teenager, she and her mother hid 5 Jews in their home. Then the resistance dropped off another 11 or 12 Jewish children. One of them was a 12-year-old boy, the only boy in the group. He turned out to be a psychopath. He hit the Jewish girls and stole food from them. He was very rude to my grandmother and repeatedly threatened to snitch on her to the Nazis. At first, he threatened to snitch to get more food. As time went on, his demands became more and more outrageous. Eventually, he demanded they provide him with a suit. What did he need a suit for? That was the last straw. My grandmother killed him. Maybe she thought that killing him would save the little girls he was abusing. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. The girls ran off and probably starved to death. Only 2 or 3 of them survived the war. In the end, Grandma mostly failed. This story makes me feel sick. Story 4. When I was about 15, I had an online boyfriend who was around 13. He would call me really late at night and ask me to tell him dirty things. This was back around the turn of the millennium, and long-distance calls were expensive. He told me his mom was going to have surgery soon and that he might not be able to call as much because he, his brother, or his dad would probably be using the phone a lot. I didn't think much of it. Then one day I got a call from his number in the middle of the day. It was his mom, screaming at me and demanding to know which one of her two sons had been calling this number. She wanted to talk to my parents. I knew his brother too, but didn't talk to him as much, so I admitted it was Justin. His mom kept going on about how she couldn't afford a several $100 phone bill when her surgery was the next day and was going to cost a lot. I apologized and she started to calm down a bit. She told me never to talk to her kids again. She cut off the phone and internet, and I never saw either of the boys online again. I still feel bad about it. Dudes, I'm so sorry, and I hope your mom didn't kill you. Story 5. Once I got a breast infection related to breastfeeding that took forever to diagnose and treat. I had already taken antibiotics for it, but I guess the bacteria were resistant. I stopped breastfeeding, and one side was fine, but the other side just kept getting bigger and was extremely painful. I was doubled over in pain. I went to the doctor, and they scheduled an ultrasound for the next day. There was a pimple-like spot on the side of my breast, so I poked it with a sterilized needle. It turned out that the skin there was as thin as a blister, and about 2 cups of pus came out. I felt so much better afterward. I remember that I slept really well that night. Someone else watched my baby the whole night. I didn't go to the appointment the next day. I didn't have insurance, and it would have been really expensive. The doctor was really mad when I called to cancel. That was a few years ago. I'm fine now. Story 6. About 10 years ago, I started working for a prestigious consulting firm. I'm originally from a small southern town and never quite fit the mold of my coworkers. I wasn't exactly as classy as the rest of them. A few months after I started, the senior partner hosted a Christmas party. As was typical on Friday afternoons, I met a few coworkers for lunch at a small neighborhood pub to share lunch and a pitcher of Guinness. I decided it would be a good idea to have a Philly cheesesteak at that time. Mistake number 1. The party was set to begin at 4 p.m., and the office would shut down early. Since I lived 87 miles from the office, I couldn't go home before the party. I waited the required 15 minutes after 4 and then drove to the party. I pulled up in front of this massive house in my beat-up truck and parked right by the door. Mistake number 2. I rang the doorbell and discovered I was the first to arrive, and to make it even more awkward, the valets hadn't arrived yet. Seriously, who has valets at their home? I was way out of my element. After an awkward 30 minutes, other guests began to arrive, and I started to calm down. Around the same time, food was served. The spread was impressive, and eating was one thing I could do without having to interact much. The food selection was vast, and I tried a bit of everything. Pad thai, meatballs, wings, caviar, smoked salmon, cheese ball, and other questionable dishes. After about 20 minutes, I remembered my earlier Philly cheesesteak and Guinness, along with all the stuff I'd just eaten. 3 glasses of wine didn't help either. My stomach was cramping badly. Realizing it was an emergency, I stealthily found the restroom. Unfortunately, the only bathroom for guests in this huge house was a small nook right next to the sitting room where everyone was chatting quietly. As I approached, I had to excuse myself around a partner and his wife, who were standing right outside the restroom door. I pushed past and hurried inside, realizing my situation was dire. It wasn't going to be a tidy situation, but I managed to pull off a somewhat successful ninja escape. The smell was somewhat manageable, and I flushed before it spread. I thought I was safe. As I left the bathroom, the same guy and his wife were still standing there. I moved along to another room, relieved to be done with it. Just then, the last partner of the firm arrived with his kids. His youngest child made a beeline for me and sat on my lap. I had never met the kid before, and it was awkward. I tried to chat with the kid, but he wouldn't respond to my questions. So, I asked the partner, "How old is she?" Mistake number 3. He replied, "He is 3. Great. The realization hit me, and my stomach churned again. I let out a silent but deadly fart. The kid loudly announced, "Ooh, you pooted!" loud enough for everyone to hear. Mortified, I quickly excused myself. I made my way back to the tiny restroom, and guess who was standing outside again? My nemesis. This time, I didn't even bother to apologize. The second round was even worse. No ninja move this time, just pure chaos. It was like a scene from a disaster movie. I prayed it would end, but it didn't. Eventually, I was done, drenched in sweat. The small bathroom smelled like something had died. I dreaded leaving, but had no choice. When I finally came out, my nemesis was gone. Small victories, I guess. As I walked into the room, I noticed I was the center of attention. I nodded and made my exit. There was my beat-up truck, still parked right in front of the door, while everyone else had parked neatly to the side. The valets gave me a look of disapproval. I thought it couldn't get worse, but then my stomach made another noise. I tore down the driveway and sped to the nearest gas station, about 10 miles away. It was a full-service truck stop, packed with truckers. I rushed into a stall and unleashed what felt like the final round of my intestinal apocalypse. The restroom fell silent. Eventually, I managed to stumble out, only to be greeted by 5 truckers who applauded. These were my people. I gave a small bow and made my way home without any further incidents, nursing my wounded pride. Story 7. I'm assuming this is going to get buried, but I've needed a place to share this for a while now, if nothing else for pure catharsis. Let me set the stage. My fiancé works the afternoon shift, and I work days. I get home from work, feed and walk the dog, and then head down to my den for the night. Since my fiancé and I have been working different shifts for a while, I have to admit a couple of things. First, I haven't been keeping my computer, Xbox room as clean as I should. It's not a complete mess, but there are some dirty clothes and empty beer cans. Basically, it looks like a single college dude's room. Second, I haven't been getting much action lately because we rarely see each other. With the dog fed, I entered the basement computer room. I turned on a mellow playlist on Spotify to set the mood, opened an incognito window, and went straight to Pornhub like any self-respecting, horny, single guy would do. Honestly, I can't remember what videos I watched that night. If it was anything like usual, it was probably some MILF stuff, a little interracial, maybe a Nuru massage or two. But what happened next was too messed up for me to recall the rest. I'll skip the details, but I spent about an hour enjoying myself, slowly edging to what I expected to be an epic finish. I finally decided to wrap it up, loaded the perfect video, and looked around for something to clean up with. There it was, a black sock right next to me. Now, some might think it's weird, but let's be real. We've all used a sock at least once. They fit well, don't chafe, and catch everything for easy cleanup. I wrapped the sock around myself and got to finishing. I couldn't help but notice something felt a bit weird during the pauses, like the material was shifting, tickling my pubes and shaft. But I was too caught up to pay much attention. I finished, though it wasn't as great as expected. Something about that tingling sensation just didn't feel right. Then I noticed it, a fing earwig crawling down my softening shaft toward my pubes. I panicked and threw the sock on the floor. Another earwig jumped out from the side and started running around the tip. I freaked out, slapping at it, then realized I was basically punching myself in the banana. I screamed and ran into the other room. After making sure my junk was bug-free, I cautiously went back to the computer room and turned the sock inside out. 4 more earwigs scurried around inside. It took me 6 months before I could even think about masturbating again, and 2 years later, I still have to use tissues because the thought of using a sock makes me go completely soft. That was the most disgusting experience I've ever had. Story 8. Oh man, I've never told anyone this. One day I was on the weird part of the internet and came across a blog about a woman who claimed she regularly had sex with her dog. Curious, I read more to try to understand why. She even included pictures and a video. My curiosity led me to watch some zoophilia videos until I suddenly realized I was actually turned on by the idea of a big dog doing a girl doggy style. I immediately closed all the pages and deleted my history. I felt like a complete sicko and have never had the courage to even tell my boyfriend. Another confession. The thought of my boyfriend holding my head and roughly thrusting into my mouth turns me on more than anything. I've even fantasized about lying on my back while he does it. I've hinted at it before, but he wasn't interested. I never brought it up again. Story 9. I don't like my oldest child. I love her. I always will. But I really, really don't like her. She is by far the most toxic person I've ever known. Drama-filled, a pathological liar who makes things up about the family, constantly making bad decisions that affect everyone. I can't even begin to list all the personal offenses. She's the cruelest, meanest, most vindictive person I have ever known. How she came from our family is a complete mystery. No one else is anything like her, and one by one, we are all distancing ourselves from this train wreck. We have all tried to support her, love her, and help her. Each of us has been burned or left dazed and confused by her words and actions. Her aunts, uncles, and cousins have cut off contact. Her siblings have said no more. Her father is frustrated and confused. I've been her only ally and support, but now I'm done. She finally did something that crossed the line. Something that was the final straw. I can't even talk to her. Not even to tell her I can't talk to her. She frightens me. Story 10. When I was a kid, around 10 years old, I had a bunk bed with my younger sister, the only family member I'm still really close to. The bed frame was made of metal, but the metal was hollow. It had a small screw-on plastic cap on top, which could be easily removed. Being a curious kid, I saw this hole and had a strange thought. I could take a dump in that hole. I should take a dump in that hole. I tried it, but the sharp metal hurt. So I put plastic dog bags on my hands, waited for the poop to drop, grabbed it, and stuffed it inside the bed frame, without the bag. I reused the bag to avoid anyone noticing they were missing. Eventually, we were going to move. Me, my little sister, the dog, my dad, and my stepmom. No one could smell the poop because of the plastic cap, and I'd been doing this for a while. By that point, the bed frame pieces were about 3/4 full of poop. Since we couldn't afford a new bed, we needed to take it with us. My heart sank as my dad picked it up, twisted it upside down to move it, and suddenly a horrifying mound of poop poured out onto the carpet. Needless to say, the next week, a nurse came to my school and suggested I might have autism. My life is a mess. Story 11. This isn't really disgusting, but it's still a personal secret. I started college last year and met this really pretty girl. Not hot, just pretty, with a cute face. She told me her name, but I forgot it right after. I remembered the beginning of her name and knew that we only had one class together that first week. Being the clever guy I am, I checked the class list online, found similar names, and looked them up on Facebook. I found her profile, learned her full name, and accidentally memorized it. Then I went into full creepy stalker mode. I Googled her name and found an old YouTube channel she had from about 3 years before college. It didn't have much, but it led me to her Twitter account. From there, I found her gaming username and tracked down her main gaming account. I discovered that she used to have a decent Twitch following for Minecraft when she was younger. She was involved in some Minecraft communities and had online friends she'd play with every day. I also learned she had an odd relationship with a 30-year-old guy when she was underage. I learned all of this just a week after meeting her. Then I saw her again, asked for her number, and casually brought up one of the games I knew she liked. We became good friends after that, even though she didn't like me as more than a friend. I did hear her mention me a few times on her stream, just saying stuff like, "Oh yeah, me and my friend did X today." It's kind of funny because I realized it was definitely her when she showed me some texts from people in her phone, and the names matched her online friends from her bio. Basically, I e-stalked my college crush to find out her interests so I could get to know her better. It wasn't meant to be creepy. I just got carried away trying to figure out her name. Story 12. This didn't happen to me, but it's a story from my brother's old high school. Apparently one day someone took a dump right in the middle of a classroom while no one was there. The next day the teacher was furious and sent someone to get the janitor. He then demanded the culprit confess, threatening to hit everyone's hands with a stick 30 times if no one owned up. The students lined up for the punishment, and sometimes the teacher would hit their backs or legs if they moved their hands out of fear. When the guy who actually did it was next, he asked the teacher, "If I clean it up, will I still get punished?" The teacher thought for a moment and said, "Yes, but you'll only get 5 hits." Without missing a beat, the guy ripped a piece of paper from a nearby notebook, picked up the turd with it, and then threw it right at the teacher's face, yelling, "How's that for a confession?" The teacher blocked it with his stick, but chaos erupted. Right at that moment, the janitor and principal walked in, both with shocked expressions. The teacher, with feces covering part of his face, started swinging the stick at the student, flicking the mess everywhere while the rest of the class panicked and tried to escape. The student got a nosebleed and probably some bruises. Unsurprisingly, he was expelled and never heard from again. The teacher took a few weeks off after that. My brother said it was the most hilarious and chaotic thing he had ever witnessed. Story 13. My first roommates in college were 2 guys I had never met before. They were absolute slobs, disgusting to the point where they'd leave dirty laundry and leftovers from Low Country boils sitting in the living room or clogging up the sinks for weeks. I even found half-eaten hot dogs stuffed in the couch cushions. Then these guys found a pair of stray pit puppies on the side of the road, or so they claimed, and decided to take them in. Before I knew it, the apartment was infested with fleas. If you've never had fleas before, you can't imagine the terror of walking into a place knowing those little monsters could be anywhere. I'd wake up at night swatting at myself, catching them, and popping them between my fingernails. Honestly, I expected to catch the plague. One morning, I walked out of my room and stepped barefoot into a pile of dog poop. Normally, it wasn't unusual to find poop or pee around the apartment, but this time I'd had enough. I decided to take revenge. I went to a Chinese food buffet and stuffed myself with some of the nastiest concoctions they had, then followed it up with a bowl of Fruity Pebbles. Being lactose intolerant, I knew it would only take about 30 to 60 minutes to get something brewing. I went into each of their bedrooms and left a massive pile of, well, magma right on their pillows and mattresses. The screams that erupted when they found it and blamed the dogs were more satisfying than the first time I saw a pair of tits on scrambled TV channels. Story 14. I'm pretty sure I could have ended up as a mass shooter or bomber at some point. I was bullied a lot in elementary school, but it got much worse in middle school. I also had a bit of paranoia and a victim complex, which made everything feel even more intense. Because I was physically bigger than most kids, school staff seemed to hate me, especially since I would often get into physical altercations with the people who bullied me. Being on the receiving end of so much verbal abuse made me completely desensitized to words, so I ended up cursing a lot and being pretty politically incorrect. At one point, I was in such a downward spiral that whenever I met new people, I would immediately look for flaws in their character and imagine how I would punish them for it. I also had violent and sudden outbursts of rage, which usually ended with me physically assaulting other students. Fortunately, I eventually met a really nice girl who went out of her way to be kind to me. Over time, I started to realize that there was still some good in people if I tried to see it. I pursued a relationship with her, which is a whole other story, but it ended badly. Still, I'll always be grateful for her kindness because it genuinely helped me become a better and less vindictive person. Story 15. One time I threw a mixture of half-eaten leftover chicken breast and spaghetti meat sauce through my neighbor's living room window. My mom, instead of throwing food away, would feed the stray critters in the neighborhood. She told me to take the food out behind the garage. Instead, I decided to stand on the back porch and throw it, just to avoid putting on shoes and walking 20 feet. My mom had used a piece of foil as a makeshift bowl. Here's where I messed up. I didn't know that she had buried the chicken breast in the meat sauce. I wound back and threw it as hard as I could, watching the meat sauce glimmer in the moonlight. Suddenly, I saw a shadowy, diamond-shaped object break free from the sauce, followed by the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. Panic set in. I did an awkward tiptoe jog back into the house, like the bomb thief from Majora's Mask, turned off all the lights and laid flat on the living room floor. The neighbors stirred and eventually called the cops, but no one ever found out it was me. I was 20 years old at the time. Story 16. My old dorm was a suite-style setup, making it much larger than a traditional dorm. There were 5 of us living there, each with our own rooms. However, the walls were really thin, so if any of us were having S, the rest of the dorm could hear it. At the time, I was dating a girl who eventually cheated on me with one of my roommates. Later, I found out they had been emotionally involved for a while during our relationship, even if it wasn't physical. After the breakup, one of my ex's roommates, who I was friends with, told me that my roommate had been masturbating in his room to the sound of us having S for months. I decided it was time for some revenge. In our dorm, we had a communal shower that all 5 of us shared. The roommate who slept with my ex always kept his shower stuff in the small room attached to the shower, while the rest of us would take our things back to our rooms. One day, before I took a shower, I emptied out about half of his shampoo bottle and filled it back up with piss. I shook it well to mix it. A day later, my ex and my roommate showered together using his shampoo. I kept repeating this process, topping off his shampoo with piss, until he graduated later that year. Story 17. Missed the thread by a bit, and probably no one will see this, but here it goes. I didn't have a good childhood. It involved severe soul abuse and physical trauma. On top of that, I have some physical disabilities. When I was around 9, I suddenly lost hearing in one ear and became very hard of hearing in the other. This happened in the midst of all the other chaos. Because of everything I went through, I developed PTSD, depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety attacks, and a sensory disorder. Sometimes light, smells, or even touch can become overwhelming. I also sustained head trauma at 9, which left my memory really poor. I forget things easily and sometimes don't even notice when I need to use the bathroom. To make things more complicated, I now have diabetes and have lost feeling in some areas of my body. The sensation comes and goes, and doctors think it's related to diabetes, but they aren't sure. I've tried explaining my situation to doctors, but Medicaid won't cover the care I really need. They just want to put me on more pills, but I just want something that makes me feel safe. One thing that genuinely helps me is wearing diapers. It might sound strange to others, but it makes me feel extremely safe, supported, and okay. Without them, I feel like a wreck, emotionally unstable and overwhelmed. When I'm wearing them, I feel stable, loved, and not in danger. It's not Sewell for me at all. It's about comfort and safety. When I'm out of diapers like I am right now, I spiral into a dark place. Sometimes it gets so bad that I think about ending my life. I can't explain it well, but they just make me feel secure. I know it's hard to understand, but it's not a fetish. It's about feeling safe and grounded. Right now, I'm out of diapers and probably won't have any for a few months. It's hurting me emotionally and I feel lost without that comfort. It's like a craving that won't go away. I just miss feeling okay. Story 18. I've never told anyone this, and it makes me feel sick whenever I think about it because I consider myself a pretty normal guy. When I was a tween, I had a ton of folders on my computer filled with pictures of girls from my school that I thought were cute. I pulled these photos from MySpace and Facebook over the course of a few years. Each folder was named after the girl whose pictures were inside. And if a girl was popular, she definitely had a folder. In total, I had thousands of pictures spread across at least 40 folders. I would spend long periods browsing their social media photo albums, just saving pictures. It was like a weird habit, and I never really thought much about how creepy it was at the time. Looking back, it made me feel really gross and uncomfortable around a lot of the girls at school. Even now, sometimes I'll think back to it when talking to someone who had a folder and feel terrible. The worst part was being around someone or talking to them the day after I had just gone through their MySpace or Facebook page. They had no idea that the seemingly normal guy they were talking to had secretly saved all their pictures. Story 19. When I was a nosy teenager, I found a videotape of my dad cross-dressing in my junior high graduation dress. It completely caught me off guard because my dad had always been the typical manly dad who coached my siblings and me in sports. He never showed any interest in clothing or anything typically associated with women. The closest thing I had ever seen was when he and my mom went to a Halloween costume party dressed as a baseball player and a cheerleader. Finding that tape was shocking, but I never said anything to him, and I never saw anything else like it until about 30 years later. He gave me a CD of family photos, and unfortunately, he hadn't checked the files before giving it to me. He had just dumped his camera's memory card onto the CD without sorting through it. There were more cross-dressing photos, this time showing body parts I can't unsee. At least he was buying his own clothes and lingerie now, but no one wants to see their elderly father tucking anything. I gave him the CD back and told him to check his photos carefully before sharing them with anyone. I didn't mention the cross-dressing, and he didn't bring it up either. I guess he figured it out on his own later. I consider myself open-minded, so it didn't freak me out because of what he was doing, just that it was my dad and it came out of nowhere. I've never really understood cross-dressing, especially since I hate the kind of clothes he was wearing, tight and uncomfortable stuff that I'd never wear. I'm more of a t-shirt and jeans person. My parents have been happily married for more than 60 years, and I wonder if my mom knew. She has Alzheimer's now, so I'll never know unless my dad brings it up. Since he didn't say anything when I returned the CD, I doubt he ever will. Now that he's in his 90s, I just hope he keeps his stuff somewhere safe. I'd hate for a family member who doesn't know to accidentally find it, since he clearly isn't open about it. Story 20. In 5th grade, I had to take a really bad dump. The teacher let me use the restroom, but when I got there, I couldn't go. The feeling was there, but nothing would come out. I went back to the classroom, but almost immediately the urge hit me again. I raised my hand to ask to go back, but my teacher thought I had been messing around in the halls earlier, so she didn't let me go. By this point, I could feel the poop crowning. I stood up to clench, pretending to get up to drink from the classroom water fountain. Walking to the sink was a mistake. The poop started sliding down the crack of my ass, but I managed to sit back down just in time for it to catch within the leg of my jeans. I thought I was safe, until the smell started. Everyone began noticing it. Even the teacher stopped to investigate. I thought no one would suspect me until one girl yelled, "There's poop under his shoe." That's when I realized that half of the poop had fallen down my jeans and onto the floor, and I had accidentally smeared it into the carpet. To make matters worse, a couple of other kids noticed small pellet-sized pieces of poop by the fountain. Before anyone could question it, I lied and said it must have been dog poop from when I walked through the grassy path to the playground. Miraculously, everyone believed me. Even when they joked, "Did you roll those little pieces of sheer self?" and started singing, "Rollin', rollin', rollin'. You got to keep on rollin'." The teacher called for the janitor over the intercom. As we were leaving for our home classroom, the janitor arrived to clean the mess. When the teacher told her that I had stepped in dog poop, the janitor gave me a look that made it clear. She knew. She knew I took a dump on the floor. She could just smell it. Story 21. When I was younger, I was really into Pokemon. I had Pokemon Red and played it constantly. Most kids have fond memories of playing Pokemon with friends, but unfortunately, it wasn't that popular at my school, and my neighborhood was mostly filled with older people. There was just one kid who also liked Pokemon. I was a bit older than him, but since he shared my passion for the game, we became friends. This kid wasn't well off, so when he finally got Pokemon Blue, he was ecstatic. It was a big deal for him since it was the opposite version of mine, and he was really proud to have it. One day, I was at his house, and we were hanging out and playing games. He got up to use the bathroom, and I was left alone in his room. That's when I noticed Pokemon Blue on his shelf. I'm not sure what came over me, maybe childish greed or impulsiveness, but before I knew it, I stuffed the game into my pocket. When he came back, I quickly made up an excuse to leave, even though I hadn't been there long. I rushed home with one more Pokemon game than I came with. I deprived that kid of something that really meant a lot to him. He was devastated when he couldn't find it, and since his family didn't have much money, they couldn't replace it. I already had 2 copies of Pokemon Red. I didn't need Pokemon Blue, but I took it anyway. I still don't know how I got away with it, considering I was a terrible liar as a kid. He moved away not long after, and I never gave it back. I still have it to this day, and I feel terrible every time I think about it. Story 22. One time in my early teens, I was in the basement alone and really needed to pee. It was the middle of the night, and I didn't want to go upstairs and risk waking everyone by using the bathroom. The basement bathroom scared me at night, probably because I'd seen spiders in there before. Faced with that dilemma, I found an empty pop bottle lying around and relieved my near-bursting bladder into it. When I finished, I realized it didn't have a cap. Not knowing what else to do, I put the bottle in a small garbage bin and figured I'd dump it out the next morning when no one was around. Feeling relieved, I went to sleep, thinking my plan was foolproof. A couple of days later, I had some friends over after school. After they left, my mom was cleaning the basement and found the bottle. Somehow, it had tipped over, and she ended up getting splashed with a foul-smelling liquid. "Is this urine?" she asked. I immediately realized I had forgotten to get rid of the bottle. Panicking, I tried to convince her it was just old juice or something, but she wasn't buying it. In a desperate move, I blamed one of my friends, saying he must have peed in the garbage can. My mom believed me, and my friend Colin wasn't allowed over anymore. Kids at school found out and started making fun of him for it. I still feel guilty about it to this day. I'm so sorry, Colin. Story 23. For some reason, my younger brother's facial hair grows much faster than mine, so he has to shave every single morning. Back when I was younger and still living at home with my mom, dad, and brother, we shared a bathroom. Whenever he did something to piss me off, like trying to get me in trouble, turning off my Xbox mid-game, or just being an annoying little brother, I would take his electric razor and use it to shave my pubes. And I'm not talking about just to tidy up. I mean going from a full bush to smooth as a baby's bottom, including the pelvic area and the gooch. To this day, he has no idea. Every now and then, when I visit home and he's being a little shish to me or our parents, I'll sneak in a quick trim. Story 24. I'm probably late to this thread, but I've always been a bit of a passive-aggressive asshole and a practical joker. A few years back, in college, I lived with my brother and his wife. I paid quite a bit of money for a tiny bedroom and the spare bathroom. At some point, they decided to get 2 Bengal cats and put the litter box in my bathroom. They thought getting a cat genie was a great idea. The concept behind the cat genie is that it uses washable little plastic pellets, And after the cats go, a proximity sensor sucks up the waste and deposits it in the toilet. Sounds good in theory, right? In reality, it was a disaster. The machine barely worked. It would miss the poop most of the time, and during the cleaning cycle, it would superheat everything to sanitize it. The result? A disgusting cat shard piss soup that smelled absolutely horrifying. The machine would heat it up and stir it around, creating a thick, nauseating stench that would fill the entire 1,300 square foot house. You could literally feel the smell hit your face when you walked in. Sometimes it was so bad I'd just leave and spend the night at a friend's or a girl's place. The worst part was the tiny plastic pellets. They got everywhere. Nothing was worse than stepping out of the shower and landing on wet, used kitty litter. The smell and the mess were unbearable. But since I took the brunt of it, I decided to get a little revenge. I started scooping up small handfuls of the plastic pellets and sprinkling them around the house. Inside their bedroom, their shower, even in their shoes and car. If I had to suffer, so did they. This went on for months, and they were absolutely baffled as to how the pellets kept getting everywhere. Eventually, they thought the problem was that the bathroom and hallway were tiled and the pellets were just being kicked around. They finally removed the $400 litter box and put a regular one in the office on the carpet. To this day, only my wife knows the truth. I think my brother has his suspicions, but it's such an absurd thing that he's never directly confronted me about it. Story 25. I'm using an alt to protect my identity because this is something I've never shared before. I have two families. Some serious stuff happened when I was a little kid. I don't remember much of it, but my real mother told me about it later. Basically, my father took me out one day, and he was killed. The person who killed him took me into custody and raised me as his own child. His name was Garen. When I lived with Garen, I had 4 siblings. My oldest brother, Alexander, didn't really like how Garen ran things at home, but he dealt with it anyway. My oldest sister, Camilla, had been abused by her own mother when she was a child, so she made it her mission to treat us well and protect us. Sometimes it felt like she spoiled us a bit, but it came from a place of wanting us to feel safe. My younger brother, Leon, was kind of a sarcastic jerk, but he never really meant any harm. Then there was my younger sister, Elise. She was always cheerful and often ran off to the city, where she introduced me to a lot of my friends. For most of my time there, I wasn't really allowed to leave my room much, and if I did, I had to be with Alexander or Camilla. Eventually, Alexander convinced Garen to let me go out by myself. But the first time I did, I ended up getting caught at a local supermarket by my real mother and my biological siblings. That was how I ended up going back to my real family. I haven't told many of my friends about this. Just a few from Garen's household who already knew. I think I spent about 15 years living with Garen before being reunited with my real family. Story 26. This happened recently, so I'm using a throwaway. One morning after a heavy night of drinking, I woke up needing to pee really badly. I rushed to the bathroom, only to find my roommate already in the shower. Desperate, I went back to my room and did the pee dance, hoping he'd finish soon, but the urge just kept getting worse. Then I noticed a giant soda cup from the day before sitting on my nightstand. It still had some liquid in it, but I didn't have another cup to pour it into. In a panic, I tried to toss the leftover drink through the window screen, but I ended up spilling it everywhere. By this point, my bladder was screaming, and I was sweating and holding myself like my life depended on it. I placed a dirty towel on the floor, put the cup on top, aimed, and just hoped for the best. It felt like I was peeing forever, and I nearly filled the entire cup. I almost cried from the sheer relief. Afterward, I had to figure out what to do with the cup of pee. I put the lid back on to make it look like a normal soda and rushed to the kitchen to dump it down the sink before my roommate got out of the bathroom. Since I'd been drinking beer the night before, the pee had a strong scent and made the kitchen smell a bit funky. I just hoped no one would notice. Later, once the embarrassment faded, I thought about telling my roommate because, in hindsight, it was kind of funny, but I decided to keep it as my dirty little secret. Story 27. This is a bit of a long one, but here it goes. When I was graduating high school, my parents decided to throw a party to celebrate. We needed some extra chairs, so my aunt and uncle offered to lend us some. They lived about an hour and a half away, so my uncle agreed to meet me halfway at a park and ride lot. At this point, I had been drinking Natty Light and eating Nachos Bel Grande for days, so my intestines were in rough shape. I was sitting in my car at the park and ride wearing basketball shorts and boxers, just chilling and listening to music while waiting for my uncle. I felt the urge to fart, just a little squeaker, no big deal. Except it was a big deal. Boom, splash, next thing I know, I'm swimming in hot cocoa. I had no extra clothes, no napkins, nothing. I was completely screwed. I managed to slide off my basketball shorts and put them in the passenger seat. Then I carefully peeled off my boxers, which were completely covered in crap. Legs, ass, balls, everywhere. Disgusted, I tossed the soiled boxers out the window. I tried to get my shorts back on without contaminating them and drove to the nearest gas station, ass hovering above the seat. I cleaned myself up as best as I could and then drove back to the park and ride to meet my uncle. Unfortunately, I ended up parking right next to the spot where I had tossed my boxers. As we were loading the chairs into the car, my uncle suddenly exclaimed, "Aw, gross, look at that. Someone totally eshia their pants." Of course, I wasn't about to admit it was me, so I just agreed. I know, man. People around here are like animals. To this day, my uncle still tells that story and laughs about it, and I have never confessed that it was actually me. Story 28. About 8 months ago, I had one of the most humiliating experiences of my life. It was lunchtime at school, and I felt the need to pee, so I headed to the urinal thinking it was just going to be a normal bathroom break. While I was peeing, I suddenly felt the need to fart. I looked around to make sure no one was nearby, checked the toilet cubicles, empty. Confident, I decided to let it rip. Big mistake. What I thought was just a fart turned out to be the most disgusting, sludgy, semi-wet, semi-solid sure that came tumbling down into my boxers and slithered all the way down my trousers. It felt absolutely vile. I could feel it dripping onto my shoes and staining my socks. Horrified, I waddled into one of the cubicles and locked myself in, trying to process what had just happened. I was 18 years old in school, and I had just eshed myself. I had no idea how to get out of this without anyone noticing the smell or seeing the mess on my legs. I knew I had to change out of the soiled clothes somehow. First, I took off my shoes and carefully peeled off my sheet-covered socks, tossing them into the toilet. Then I put my shoes back on and remembered I had an old Royal Navy cadet uniform in my gym bag back in my form room. The problem was the registration bell had just rung and the halls were full of people. Steeling myself for the most embarrassing walk of my life, I unlocked the cubicle and waddled out, moving as discreetly as possible with my boxers sticking to my ass and my trousers clinging to my legs. I made it up a flight of stairs trying to avoid eye contact with everyone. When I got to my form room, my friend, let's call him P, asked, "We both have class together next. Want to go together?" I was dying inside, but managed to say, I just need to grab something. I'll meet you there." I quickly grabbed my gym bag and made my way to the nearest toilet, barricading myself in another cubicle. Luckily, I had a spare pair of navy blue trousers in my bag. I peeled off my shade-covered pants, which left my hands stained, and put on the clean pair. To hide the smell, I put the soiled trousers back on over the navy pants, making it a double layer. Then I called a taxi from the cubicle because there was no way I was taking the train home like that. After a tense walk to the school gates, where thankfully lessons had started and the halls were empty, I got into the taxi. The driver definitely noticed the smell, but thankfully he didn't say anything. I just asked him to drive as fast as possible. When I got home, I saw my dad's car in the driveway. My heart sank. I tried to sneak inside without being noticed. Thankfully, he was out for a run. I rushed to the bathroom and took the longest, most thorough shower of my life, scrubbing so hard my skin felt raw. Just as I finished, I heard the front door open. Panicked, I grabbed the vile trousers, wrapped them in a plastic bag, and crept downstairs to throw them in the outdoor waste bin. When my dad saw me and asked why I was home early, I told him, "Oh, the teachers had a training course, and we got let out early." He didn't question it, thank God. To this day, I still feel filthy thinking about that experience, but I'm just relieved I managed to pull it off without anyone finding out. Story 29. I apologize if this is a bit disjointed. It's late where I am, and I wanted to keep it brief. I'm a closet bisexual and bi-curious guy, though I definitely have a strong preference for women. At one point, I had a massive crush on a girl I worked with. It was pretty obvious to everyone around us, and even she knew it. I tried my luck a few times, but never succeeded. Some of the other girls at work, who knew both of us, would tease her about it. Funny enough, I also found some of them attractive. One day I was introduced to their male friend. I'd seen him on Facebook before, but never met him. I knew he was gay, though he wasn't particularly flamboyant. When we shook hands for the first time, I felt a bit of chemistry. On another night out, when I was leaving the club, he lightly touched my chest as I said goodbye, and I knew something was up. Fast forward a few months to another night out. We all hung out together, but eventually the girls went home, and it was just the two of us left. I was in town for work, staying at a hotel, and we'd both had quite a bit to drink. I could tell he was eyeing me up, and there was definitely some tension between us. We ended up spending some time alone, and I mustered up the courage to flirt a little. Somehow I managed to say the right things, and when the place closed, I made a sarcastic comment about a lonely night in bed, hinting that he might feel the same way. He admitted he was in a bit of a dry spell and didn't have to go home just yet. I brushed his hand lightly and invited him back to my hotel. We spent the next couple of hours having an amazing time. I ended up topping him, and it was my first time with a guy. I didn't expect it to feel so natural, comfortable, and intimate. It was genuinely a revelation, and I didn't have any regrets. He was a runner, had a lean body, and was pretty experienced, which made the whole experience even better. We ended up hooking up 3 more times after that before we mutually decided to end it. He's now in a steady relationship, and I'm currently single. I learned a lot from him, and it definitely satisfied my curiosity. It made me realize that I can comfortably sleep with other men if the situation arises. This all happened back in 2013. We're still good friends, and none of the girls know about it. It was just some clean, consensual fun between adults, and it'll always stay our little secret. Story 30. This might not be the most disgusting thing I've done, but it's the first thing that came to mind. Back in college, I was going through a tough time and started seeing a therapist. She worked out of her house, and I would take the bus to the edge of campus and then walk the rest of the way to her place. One day, by the time I got to her house, I desperately needed to pee. I arrived about 10 minutes early, so I knew she was still with another client, and I couldn't just barge in. Plus, I had this weird anxiety about asking to use her bathroom. The pain from holding it in got so bad that I knew I had to go somewhere immediately, regardless of who might see me. I ran around in her backyard like a madman before finally settling on a potted plant. I peed on that poor plant for nearly a solid minute. Once I finished, I went back to the door and waited for her to come out. As it turned out, I didn't even have an appointment that day. However, she remembered that my insurance had screwed something up, and apparently she owed me a little over $100. She handed me a wad of cash and sent me on my way. It took me a while to wrap my head around the fact that I had basically just gotten paid $100 for pissing in my therapist's yard. What a weird world. Story 31. I'm not sure if this counts as disgusting, but here goes. When I was in my early 20s, I decided to try LSD for the first time. I bought a good amount from a friend and took a flight to Ireland to meet another friend who was staying there for a while. We decided to go to a small town and trip together. At first, the trip started out pretty normal. We were both seeing some cool stuff and enjoying it. Then at some point, I blacked out. When I came to, still tripping hard, my buddy had entered a full-on bad trip. He was running up and down the stairs of our hostel, shouting that I was God and he didn't want to be the devil. Naturally, this attracted the attention of the few other people staying at the hostel. One woman was pretty understanding when I explained the situation, and we tried to calm him down, but that just made him freak out even more. Later, he admitted that he didn't understand how I seemed so normal while he was losing his mind. Truthfully, I was also tripping hard, but I just managed to keep my composure. Eventually, the owner of the hostel showed up. I swear when he turned on the light, he looked exactly like Jesus. This surprisingly calmed my friend down for a bit. I stepped outside to smoke with one of the people we had woken up, but then we heard a loud crash, followed by the front door slamming. My buddy was gone. He was missing for about an hour. As I sat outside wondering where he went, he suddenly climbed over the back wall. He had lost his sweatshirt somewhere, but seemed more in control of himself. He just asked to go to sleep, so we helped him to bed, and that was that. The next day, I was wandering around the city when I found his sweatshirt. It was covered in blood and lying in a mostly dried puddle of blood. I never asked him what happened that night. We only hung out one more time after that, and I couldn't bring myself to confront him. To this day, I'm not sure what went down, but I sometimes worry he might have hurt someone. Story 32. One night, I got drunk with a friend and his girlfriend, who was his girlfriend at the time, but later became his ex. We were drinking beers, but she was hitting vodka straight from the bottle. I didn't drink vodka, and I didn't see my friend having any either. It was just her. As the night went on, she started making some weird drunk confessions. First, she admitted that back in high school, she was dating a quarterback, and they had a huge fight right before a big game. In retaliation, she went to the opposing team's school, found their quarterback, and seduced him behind the bleachers after practice. Then right before the game, she told her boyfriend what she had done. She didn't mention what happened afterward, but it was a pretty messed up story. Then came the second confession, which was way more disturbing. She said that when she was younger, she would dress her little sister in their mother's bras and panties, tying them off on the side so they would fit. They also had some kind of pole, not a proper stripper pole, but something similar. She claimed she taught her little sister to pole dance and would make her perform for her girlfriends and even some guys. She emphasized that no one ever touched her sister. They just thought it was funny. The really messed up part? Her sister was supposedly around 3 or 4 years old at the time. I'm not sure how much of what she said was true. She was extremely drunk, and while people often say that drunken words are sober thoughts, she was also known to exaggerate and make things up. Later on, she cheated on my friend with another guy, who then cheated on her with someone else. Looking back, I'm not even sure she had a sister or dated a quarterback. She might have been a complete bullster, but at the time, I didn't have the best bullshit detector. I still think about it sometimes and wonder what the truth was. Story 33. During an 8th grade school retreat, I had one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. I shat myself. It happened at around 3:30 in the morning. Everyone was asleep in bunk beds and the lights were on. Earlier that evening, we had a great dinner with steak and pork chops. I ended up eating extra because I was grouped with some girls and they didn't finish their meals. Not that I minded, I was happy to help out. After dinner, we had an emotional group session where everyone cried their hearts out. Exhausted, we all went to bed. Around midnight, the air conditioning blasted to full power, and the room was freezing. I started feeling my stomach rumble and churn like it was turning into a weird gelato with chunks. I ignored it, thinking it was just a side effect of the big meal in the cold room. But by 3:30, I knew it was serious. I rushed to the door, only to find the lock jammed. In my frantic attempts to open it, I didn't notice that my body had already started to betray me. Finally, I got the door open and made a break for the restroom, only to realize my massive dump had already fallen behind me. Panicked, I raced back to the room, carefully avoiding the roaming teachers. I changed as fast as I could, with the lights still on, hoping to God that nobody noticed me stuffing the stained underwear into the bottom of my knapsack. The next day, the teachers ended up blaming the seniors for the mess. I still feel guilty about it to this day, but I'm just grateful that no one ever found out it was me. Story 34. I have so many secrets. Some small, some not so small. Sometimes I feel like a monster who needs therapy or even to be locked away, but I can't help it, so I just live with it, even though I often give myself the creeps. One of the less important ones is that I constantly eat my boogers. I started doing it as a kid, and even though my parents would catch me and scold me, I just learned to be more secretive about it. Now I'm a grown man, and I still can't stop. Another secret is that I don't find my girlfriend physically attractive. I love her deeply, but she's gotten a bit chubby since we started dating. That doesn't bother me as much as her saggy breasts do. I have a fetish for full, round breasts, big or small, as long as they look nice. Her saggy ones are a huge turnoff, and sometimes I wish she would get a mastopexy, but I'd never push that on her. Speaking of breasts, I have an obsession with them. I know most guys like boobs, but with me, it's more of a fixation. Whenever I see a woman on the street, whether she's a teenager or a MILF, I fantasize about pulling off her shirt and playing with her boobs. Very few of my female coworkers have not been mentally groped. Sometimes I also masturbate at work. Not too often, but it happens. I just sneak into the bathroom and get it over with. I've fantasized about doing it at a coworker's desk, but I haven't gone that far. Yet. The worst part, the one that makes me feel genuinely terrible, is that I sometimes hurt one of my cats. He's a really annoying little guy, and when he pisses me off, I lose control and hit him, not too hard or even choke him lightly. Afterward, I feel like the worst person in the world. He always comes back later to purr on my lap, which makes me hate myself even more. I worry that if I ever have children, I might hurt them too. That fear eats away at me, but I don't know how to stop. I know I need help, but I'm too ashamed to seek it. I just live with these dark thoughts and do my best to keep them from affecting anyone else. Story 35. My best friend has 3 female cousins. The oldest cousin, who is the same age as me, and I started texting and getting close. At the time, she was dating a mutual friend of ours. One night, while he was away and we were all at a party together, we ended up hooking up. We never talked about it afterward, and no one ever found out. About a year later, we had a party at my parents' house while they were out of town. The youngest sister, who was 19 at the time, I was 25, was there too. I thought she had left with her boyfriend when everyone started calling it a night, but when I went to get into bed, I found her there, lying naked and waiting for me. We ended up hooking up and continued seeing each other for about 2 months. She was still with my friend during that time, but claimed he wasn't giving her the soul attention she craved. I never got a chance with the middle sister, even though she was the one I wanted the most. Years later, we're all still friends. None of them know what I did with the other, and I plan to keep it that way. Story 36. When I was 15, I got super drunk for the first time with my buddies in a forest clearing behind their mom's house while the parents were gone. We were drinking straight vodka, and none of us knew what we were doing. The last thing I remember was heading back to the house with everyone screaming, yelling, and stumbling around. The next morning, I woke up on a cot in the hallway, fully clothed, with dried, crusty diarrhea caked all through my underwear, crotch, and even up the back of my shirt. I could hear my friend's brother playing video games down the hallway and his mom downstairs. That feeling of dawning horror was indescribable. I quietly tiptoed to the bathroom, peeled off my disgusting underwear, and found a plastic bag under the sink. I wrapped them up and stuffed the bag under the garbage in the trash can. My jeans didn't look stained on the outside, and my shirt was black, so I figured I was in the clear. I knew the sheets were a mess, but I left them behind and just wanted to get out of there. When I went downstairs, my buddy saw me and immediately shouted, "Hey, shtai pants!" His mom, a bit of a loud and trashy type, joined in, and they both started taunting me with, "Shtai pants, shtai pants." I was mortified and bolted out of there. A month later, I went back, figuring the teasing would be over and we could hang out like before. I was wrong. My friend, his brother, and his mom basically cornered me, taunting me again with "shtai pants" repeatedly. It was humiliating, and I ended up cussing them out before leaving for good. About a year later, I saw my buddy again when I visited him and his brother in the new city they had moved to. We ended up dropping some acid together, one of the best trips of my life. During that night, the real story finally came out. They had always told me that I just so straight up shit my pants. Not true, apparently. On the way back to the house, I stopped, pulled down my pants, and squatted, letting out a pile of diarrhea right there. As I was pulling my pants back up, my buddy nudged me with his foot, causing me to fall backward and sit right in it. Then I just pulled my pants up like nothing had happened and kept walking. Hearing that story after all those years somehow made me feel a bit better, even though it was still pretty embarrassing. Funny how time and a little bit of LSD can change your perspective on things. Story 37. When I was in the 3rd or 4th grade, I went to the Philippines for the first time with my family. I've always had a phobia of pooping in public restrooms, and I still do. One day we went to a water park that wasn't very crowded, so my family was basically the only group there, along with a few other people. While playing in the big pool, my stomach started rumbling, and I knew I had to take a massive shush. I tried to brave the public restroom, but as soon as I saw how disgusting the stalls were, I bailed. Desperate and uncomfortable, I came up with a stupid plan. I would just go in the pool. I found a corner of one of the big pools where no one could see me and unleashed a huge mud monkey that floated right to the top. Panicked, I quickly swam away and went to play with my older brother. He was dragging me around the pool in an inflatable tube when he spotted what he thought was a piece of wood. As he got closer, he freaked out when he realized it was actual rage. He told my mom, and my uncle overheard and got furious. He called the staff over and demanded they do something about it. One of the workers grabbed a long pole net, the kind you use to fish out leaves from a pool, and scooped out my brown trout. They tossed it into the grass and sprinkled chlorine around the area to clean it up. My family never found out it was me, but I'll never forget that horrifying day.